As a gamer, I feel like the game industry right now is just so incredibly frustrating. I mean, it really feels like developers or game companies as a whole are just kind of focusing on the wrong thing. We've kind of seen that with this whole Sweet Baby Inc. thing and the DEI. I mean, all of that's just absolutely ridiculous. And then you have journalists coming in here just putting out just absolute nonsense stories because they want to push their own agenda. I mean, this is all just absolutely ridiculous. But we have kind of seen that these game companies are focusing on the wrong thing. And I think that that goes beyond just the stories and the characters and all the things that they want to inject in these games. But we're also talking about performance. Over the last 2 years, we have started to trend in a direction where 30 FPS is slowly creeping back into this generation of consoles. I mean, that was kind of the big thing going into this generation. When we got to PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, the big selling point was 60 FPS and faster load times. But now we're starting to see games like Starfield and Final Fantasy XVI, Dragon's Dogma, or even Final Fantasy VII Rebirth to an extent. These games don't feel or look good enough for this generation, and it's just baffling to me in certain ways because there is an option to maybe improve this at least somewhat. So I want to talk a little bit about that today because we did get an update for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which I'm very happy about. It's at least, I'd say, acceptable. We'll get more into that here in a little bit, but we will be talking about all of that today. Then also, we will talk about Metacritic's Publisher of the Year, and I was actually pleasantly surprised by this news, so we will get into all of that as well. Let's go get things started off, though, with a review roundup, because it's actually a very busy week for gaming, and I hate when game companies do this. I have no idea why they do the things that they do sometimes, but all three of these games are actually releasing on the exact same day, being tomorrow on March 22nd. Make it make sense because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Nonetheless, I am talking about Princess Peach Showtime. At least this is on a completely different platform. But then you also have Rise of the Ronin releasing on the same exact day as Dragon's Dogma 2. You would think these publishers would figure out, hey, this might not be a good idea. Maybe we should give each other space and kind of give all of these games their own time to shine. For whatever reason, some of these publishers just cannot figure that out. And I think Rise of the Ronin is going to feel the brunt of that because on one side, you have Dragon's Dogma 2, and we talked about this yesterday. Critics are loving this game. It has an 87 overall score on Metacritic, and people are praising it for its world, the combat, the interactions that you have, the enemy AI, and it just sounds like an absolutely fantastic game. No, the FPS is probably not where it needs to be. We'll circle back to that here in a bit. But then you have Rise of the Ronin. Now, this is Team Ninja's new game, and, you know, they've made a lot of great games in the past, whether that be Ninja Gaiden. You have the Neo series, and then also Wolong Fallen Dynasty. All of these are great games, and they clearly specialize with their hack and slash style of combat. And once again, it does sound like Rise of the Ronin is no different. If you are buying into this game because of its combat alone, it does sound like it's going to be an overall fun experience. Where critics seem to be a little bit more mixed, though, is with some of the other aspects of the game, specifically with the open world and maybe some of the quest designs. I have heard things like it's repetitive or the open world is just not simply fun enough. And that's why currently its review score sits at a 76 overall score. Now, it still sounds like it's going to be a solid overall experience, but I just think with it releasing on the exact same day as Dragon's Dogma 2, I mean, I'm just not so sure about that decision. Now, as for Princess Peach Showtime, like I said, this is for a completely different platform, and it's going to appeal to, you know, a different audience as a whole, and it does have a 75 overall score. It's being described as a fun experience with a fresh new formula, but I would also say that's kind of the thing about this specific title. Princess Peach doesn't really have the star power that, you know, a Mario would or a Zelda title, so I do feel like its reviews are important, and I'm not exactly sure if these scores will do enough to convince people who are maybe on the fence on whether or not they want to get this game. This is a full-priced $60 title after all, so, I mean, I guess we'll just have to kind of see what happens, but if you do want to go check out the reviews, maybe follow a reviewer that you trust and see what they think about the game and see if you want it from there. There is also a playable demo on the Nintendo eShop, so you can try it that way as well. All right, so let's go and talk about game development for this generation of consoles. And At times, I just kind of feel like developers are not focusing on the right things. I mean, we can talk about the DEI stuff and the sweet, stinky baby of the world. We can talk about all of that and the journalists trying to gaslight everybody. I mean, all of that is ridiculous right now. Much of the game industry is just not focusing on the right things. Maybe I'll talk about all of that in a future video. But for today, I want to talk more about the performance side of games, because we have started to see this become more of a trend over the last 2 years. Games like Starfield, you have Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth to an extent, and then even the upcoming Dragon's Dogma 2. These are either games that are just flat out 30 FPS, or they just don't feel good in performance mode. And I feel like that's what Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth falls into. Yes, it does run at a rather solid 60 frames per second, but at a major sacrifice to its visual clarity. Now, this is a game that I very much care about. Final Fantasy 7 is one of my favorite games ever made, and that's really all the more reason why I think it's annoying that there's not a good way to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Yes, it's a great, fantastic game, but you also have to overlook that you have to either play it in 30 FPS or you have to play it at 60 FPS with just this terrible image quality. It honestly kind of reminds me of Nintendo Switch games to a degree. I mean, you have games like Xenoblade, and I think that game both looks great and bad at the same time. I mean, you can clearly see the art style is really good. I like the worlds and everything, but it's just got this blurry, messy look to it because its resolution is just not high enough, and that's what I kind of get the sense of in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Well, the good news here is that Square Enix did drop a patch last night, 1.020, which addresses the quality in performance mode. They did make improvements to frame rate and overall game stability. They also added sharp or soft options for graphical output in performance mode, and then they made some improvements to graphical quality as well. Now, I did briefly test this last night, and to my eye, I feel like there is an improvement here, but it is subtle. Like, don't go in expecting any kind of massive changes or anything like that. This is still not perfect by any stretch of the means, but at the same time, I do feel like it's a little bit more in the acceptable range of image quality, which means I won't be as annoyed as what I was before, but I'm still also going to be annoyed because I feel like there's other options that they could explore that they're just simply not. And that's where I become very frustrated, because I feel like there's an option to fix problems like this with current hardware without the need of something like the PS5 Pro. I feel like currently on these consoles right now, they can improve games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like Starfield, Final Fantasy 16, and maybe even Dragon's Dogma 2 if they can make that a little bit more stable. And what I'm talking about here is 40 FPS. Why are developers not using this option? I feel like there's enough people out there that have TVs that can take advantage of 40 FPS. And this has been such a boon on the Steam Deck. That community is loving 40 FPS because it does make a difference. I know 40 FPS on paper doesn't sound like a big change from 30, but when you play it, it does feel much better, especially if you can get up to 45 FPS on the Steam Deck OLED. It really is a big improvement, and I just don't understand why console games are currently not taking advantage of this. We know they can do it because we've seen it on games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. That game has a 40 FPS option, and when they did that, I was hoping it would be a sign for more to come. But for whatever reason, these developers are just not using this as an option, and I just don't get it. It's like they're not listening to gamers. We keep saying it. We want 60 FPS, and if you just can't do that, and if you can't do it with great image quality, at the bare minimum, meet us in the middle and give us 40 FPS. More developers need to use this as an option. Show us that you're listening. If you can't get to 60 FPS in a satisfactory way, then give us 40 FPS as an option for those of us that do prefer performance. I don't know. I just feel like 40 FPS should be a standard option by this point. But let me know what you all think about all of this. Do you agree or not? And also, why? Now, on a more positive note, Metacritic just revealed their list of best publishers of 2023. Basically what they do is they look at all the different publishers and the games that they released in a given year, and then they average their scores out to a final overall score. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily take it as the be-all, end-all list or anything like that, but it is still something fun to look at, just to see how different publishers performed in terms of critical reception. And if we count down the top 10 here, this includes Thunderful at number 10. 9 is Sega. That's really great to see, especially for you Sega kids out there. 8 is Bethesda, which is quite interesting. Starfield was easily the most polarizing game last year, but it still reviewed pretty well. And they did also have a good year with games like Hi-Fi Rush, Quake, and also the release of Ghostwire Tokyo on Xbox. Number 7 is Axis. Then 6, Nintendo being the highest console maker on this list. So big congrats to them. They did have Zelda Tears of the Kingdom last year, which was just flat out one of the best reviewed games, period. Then number 5, Annapurna. Number 4, Dangan Entertainment. 3, Chorus Worldwide. Number 2, Raw Fury. And then at the number 1 spot, I'm thrilled to say it was Capcom. I mean, if you've been following the channel for a while, you probably know that I've been saying this for a while. In my opinion, Capcom has really just been the best third-party publisher for a while. I mean, if you just look at what they've done since the release of Resident Evil 7 back in 2017, they have been nothing short of consistent. Whether that be Monster Hunter, Resident Evil, or Street Fighter, they have been consistent with those high-quality releases. Now, they've also had some smaller games as well, like Ghost Trick that released last year, and I do highly recommend that game. And even in 2024, they've already gotten off to a hot start this year with Dragon's Dogma 2. I mean, okay, sure, its performance isn't exactly where I want it to be. I think I made that very clear earlier in the video, but it is still a good game, and, you know, that's been the thing about Capcom. They really have become a company synonymous with high quality, and I'm glad to see them get recognized for that on this list. Now, for those curious about the other 2 console makers, though, Sony came in at number 13, and then Xbox Game Studios was number 15. They do still track Bethesda as a separate publisher, which again was number 8. Now, one last thing that I want to talk about is Marvel 1943 Rise of the Hydra. This is Amy Hennig's next game, which I've been a big fan of her work in the past. I love the Uncharted series. It's easily a top 3 franchise for me of all time, and she was behind the first 3 games. So I'm definitely curious about her new game with Skydance New Media, and they just revealed its cinematics, and all I have to say is, wow. Like, this reveal is, quite frankly, confusing people, because I've seen a lot of people come in and think that this was a movie. Even for myself, when I first saw the pictures of this game on social media, there for a moment I thought this was a new Marvel movie, and I just kind of skimmed right by. But as I continue to hear people talk about it throughout the day, I realized that no, this is actually a brand new game starring Captain America and Black Panther. So yeah, I would say the character models in these cinematics are extremely impressive. They're apparently using Unreal Engine 5 and MetaHuman technology, and again, just wow. Like, I understand that this is only cinematics and it doesn't really speak for its gameplay. That's for a whole different topic when we eventually see it. But hey, I'd say that this is still a good first impression, if anything else. It's honestly kind of crazy to think that we've actually gotten this far in gaming, to the point that some cinematics are close to identical with movies. That says a lot for the technology that we're seeing here, but hopefully the gameplay will be revealed sometime soon. It is scheduled for a 2025 release, so maybe they'll be ready to lift the lid on its gameplay sometime this year, maybe at the Game Awards. I feel like that would be a pretty good place to reveal it, but I guess we'll see. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. Again, I do want to hear your opinions on 40 FPS games. And for that matter, let me know if you have a display that can actually take advantage of 40 Hertz. You do need a 120 Hertz display for 40 FPS. Until next time, though, peace out.